That's okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So there's a lot to say here, but I think we're all in the same breath here when we talk about why is this piece of legislation coming forward so quickly, but yet doesn't have the information in it that needs to protect all parties. So I'm just going to say that, we need to do better. We could be doing better for all Nova Scotians. This sitting, we've had one bill on the table on housing that will directly affect housing negatively. That in itself is absolutely disappointing. We have been asked to come back here and sit to be able to help Nova Scotians with legislation, through our legislation, and we are not helping Nova Scotians with the legislation put forward. So there's no bill on creating affordable housing other than by us on our side. No amendments to fix the loophole on fixed-term leases, which could have been added to this residential tenancies bill. No homelessness strategy. Legislation to create a plan to tackle this issue, which I think the minister is very well aware is about to explode. About to explode. We will pass this legislation, and we have already been feeling it in our offices on multiple occasions after the previous legislation was put forward with the 5% cap. Now we are going to be experiencing a number, an overload in a number of things that are going to be happening that I know the minister understands. So I just wanted to say that, we were in law amendments, and a number of people came, and a number of folks from all sides came and spoke about, the bill, and it wasn't in a positive way. So, I mean, if folks came in and said, we really think this is great, and, those are things to consider. But every person that came in there had an issue with the bill, an issue, whether it be on one clause or another. So, we, as the NDP, suggested to take this bill back to the department, have it looked at, go through some amendments, figure out how we can make this bill better, like we do often. And during law amendments, I was reassured by the member from Hants East that the time for amendments was during committee of the whole House. So, even though my motion was not passed to be able to have this go back to the department, I felt like, maybe there's going to be an opportunity for us to bring forward some amendments on all sides. I was hoping to see some government amendments on all sides to be able to make sure that we are protecting Nova Scotians in the rental market. Well, I want to say I appreciate all of those folks who came to law amendments, who poured their heart out, gave relevant data, spoke firmly about their personal experiences, and that with hopes that amendments would come forward in the committee of the whole House that would be reflective of what was said and presented. Amendments were presented by the opposition side, and I really feel like it could have helped the bill. It could have done some things to protect Nova Scotians because the rent cap is not rent control. And so it would have at least tried to balance it a bit more instead of the imbalance we have put forward today. So, yet to my surprise, none of our amendments were taken or even considered, even thought of. And yes, I did say 10 days because it is quite a quick rush through turnaround for all of these things. But I also wanted to point out to the fact that, the minister says time and time again that the residential tenancies is working. They are, everything that is happening is doing great, and they're doing amazing work. And yes, the staff at the residential tenancies group or board or whatever you want to call it, RTA, they are doing an amazing job. They are doing their best with what they got put forward in front of them. And what we could have done is we could have, in agreement with all parties that was put here before, whether it was tenants or landlords and parties across the aisle, we said an enforcement branch was needed. And we all agreed that that was important. And the minister looked at us and said, there has to be a balance. We will consider that. We'll take a look at the report. And lo and behold, it was recommended. We all agree on that. I mean, I can say it on this end. We agree on that. And at some point, the government side agreed as well. So I'm confused as to why we don't have something in place to help those staff in residential tenancy to do the work that they need to do in an efficient, timely manner for folks of Nova Scotia. So I'm just going to use a small example because I know the minister talks about how using the residential tenancy, it works for landlords, it works for tenants, it's for everyone, and it's a balance. You know, the process works, because that's what we heard today. Well, in my community, there's a 73-year-old woman who is disabled, who can't read or write because of her disability, and she has a severe physical impairment, and she was given notice to quit in March. So processes were followed. Absolutely. Walked them through the process, educated them on residential tenancy, went through to the hearings with them, did all of that stuff. And they were given a notice to quit at the end of March. And then let's just put this in context. Right now, they pay a little bit over $1,200 for their apartment, but the landlord in other accommodations next door to her are paying $2,100. So, you know, this tenant has been there for multiple years. Like, she has, you know, tenure, right? And no problems, none that we know of. Apparently, you know, the landlord's putting a notice to quit. So, went through the process, won the claim, and found out that, you know, the landlord was overcharging them because, you know, we do the research and all that stuff. The landlord was overcharging them illegally, and so they had to take the landlord to small claims court, which, you know, works out great. Then the landlord filed them again, another Form J, notice to quit, notice to quit. And they went to the hearing, and they found that the landlord was not in the proper means to do that stuff. And so, you know, they had a mediation. Things were working out great. The next day, the landlord filed another form and tried to push his way into her home to give them the paper, which caused this woman to have a stroke, which in turn had her hospitalized, and we had to work with this person to make sure that they made the hearing, that they were able to do this work that they needed to do. So when I hear the minister talk about the process works, it works when you have support. It works when you have people that know the process. It works when you have those. But there are a number of folks. I mean, I'm going to point to my colleague from Sable Island who has a person that doesn't leave their home, that doesn't actually access all these supports. What do we do for those folks? If we had legislation in place that was able to protect landlords and tenants to be able to make sure that they have stable home, stable processes, then this wouldn't be happening. So I just want to say what I've heard from this government every time is that, you know, their housing plan is working, build faster. And the answer to the housing crisis is supply, which, you know, when we ask what's the timeline for this supply, when is this going to be built, it's just like that, crickets. Excuse after excuse, passing the buck, talking about the federal cousins, my car broke down, the dog ate the plan, you know, whatever that is, it's being thrown at us. No answers to Nova Scotians, no answers to questions, because you know what? They know the plan, they got it together, process is working. What we haven't heard or seen yet is how this government is making lives better for Nova Scotians. Legislation can do that. That's why we come into the House to work. On the housing front, we see nothing. No units are ready for all those that are unhoused. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have shelters, we have pallet shelters, we have a number of things that are temporary, but we don't have any units, housing supply that is built today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. We have no timeline for that. So we know that the vacancy rate is 1%. That hasn't changed. And yet we are in year 3 of this term with this government, and all we hear are announcements. We have nonprofits building units for folks in record time. They got it together. They got it together. They need the funding, they can build it, and it can be ready for folks before the next season. So yet, this government with all the resources at its fingertips, and yet we have no idea when anything can be built or anything can be done. So we haven't even made a dent in the vacancy rate. So when we talk all about the supply, more homes, what we want is a stable housing market. And I'm still waiting for this government to make some bold moves to make Nova Scotians' lives better. So not worse at all. And this bill putting forward is not one that we're seeing any change other than in a negative way. So we need to do better for Nova Scotians across this province. They deserve it. And everybody who comes in and talks to us, comes to our office, comes in for law amendments, you know, they deserve to have an answer to a question about why their lives are the way that they are, why they're struggling. We've given suggestions, we've given feedback, we've given recommendations. There has been reports of recommendations, and yet we don't see any of those things happening. So think about this today. I just want you guys to just keep your minds open. When we leave here today, think about those who are struggling to make ends meet. With rent rising, grocery bills up, healthcare needs, folks being evicted just before the winter. Think about it. Where is this legislation to help those folks in Nova Scotia?